Welcome to the swinging 60s, baby. Yeah, baby, yeah, part 2. And this is Fun with History with Professor Banks. And this week, we're going to take a look at the swinging 60s, baby. The second part of our swinging 60s as we wrap up the 60s. So this is Fun with History with Professor Banks, number 29. And welcome to Fun with History. Let's get our music queued up. Welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. And as like last week, I am sporting my 60s look again, the hippie look. Okay, so I got the pants going on here, I got the shirt, and of course the wig, and this funky bead necklace. Let's not forget about that whatsoever. Okay, so this is Fun with History, number 29 already, the Swinging 60s, part 2. And this week, it's actually part 2, and my subtitle, not sure if you can see it, but it's called Two Shots. So we're going to find out what that's all about in a few minutes. But Two Shots, the Swinging 60s, part 2, Two Shots. But first, of course, our icebreaker, or our joke of the week that I like to call it. But this isn't going to be a joke this week. This is serious business. So what I want to do to start us off with this week is read a part of a famous speech that was given in 1963. I believe 1963. Let me check my notes. August 28th, 1963. Okay, this was the famous speech that was called I Have a Dream, given by Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington as part of the March on Washington. So this was a speech given by a man trying to end racism in the States. Okay, I'm not going to read all of this for you, but I am going to read a portion of it here to get us going this week. Okay, so I hope that you don't mind a little non-funniness to start this week, but this is a good speech, so let's just read a part of it, shall we? Okay, so let me bring it up here for you. Okay, so this is picking up midway through his speech, and this is called the I Have a Dream speech. Okay, this is Martin Luther King speaking in 1963. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow the situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with this vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to jet out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing." Okay, so there you have it. That is the I Have a Dream speech given by Martin Luther King Jr. And he gave that speech with about the same amount of passion that I tried to give that speech back in 1963 on the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. So Martin Luther King was a very passionate man, and he wanted racism ended. He wanted black lives to be just as important as white lives. So I hope you like that to get us going today. I have a dream. All right. Okay, so what I want to do today is quickly go over 4 events in the 60s that really changed the tone of the 60s and really made a statement in the 60s, okay? That's what I want to do. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is something that happened in 1962, okay? And this was 1962, something happened that was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so this is an ongoing global thing, the Cuban Missile Crisis. It happened in October of 1962, and essentially this was an escalation of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. Okay, so what happened in this Cuban Missile Crisis was not good. The USA and the Soviet Union came close to launching nuclear attacks against each other. And I also want to add, for this history lesson, I have special sound effects. So, here's my special sound effects for you. Bang! The Cuban Missile Crisis, the first bang that we're going to talk about. Although it didn't really come to a bang, but nevertheless, it was a crisis. Okay, let me explain the Cuban Missile Crisis to you. So what happened was, a man was in charge of Cuba called Fidel Castro, okay? And the first thing that happened was, he was trying to be overthrown by the U.S. government. The U.S. saw him as a threat. The U.S. thought that he was too harsh to his people. And the U.S. just didn't like him, just didn't have a good feeling about this Fidel Castro. So, number one, a lot of Cuban exiles migrated to the United States. And number two, the United States, after the United States tried to overthrow Cuba and Fidel Castro, and this was known as the Bay of Pigs. Oink, oink, oink. the Bay of Pigs. Okay, so what happened at the Bay of Pigs was the USA tried to overthrow Cuba, but they weren't successful. Cuba fought harder than they thought, and the USA was unable to overthrow them. So the USA went to their backup plan with Cuba and said, okay, we can't overthrow these guys, but we're going to put a trade embargo on them. Cuba had exports. One of them, a very strong export, was sugar. So the U.S. said, look, we're not going to get sugar from you anymore. We're not going to get exports from you anymore. We don't like you. So what happened? The United States enemy, the Soviet Union, came in and said, okay, you know what? These guys are a poor country trying to make money. We're going to step in and buy their sugar and other exports. Okay? So the Soviet Union intervened. Soviet Union and the USA were having a Cold War with each other. This cannot be a good thing. Okay? So what happened was, as I said, JFK, the president at the time, imposed a naval blockade on further shipments to Cuba. And what happened was also, because there was this Cold War going on, basically the USA had nuclear missile sites stationed in Turkey and Italy. Okay? So they had these missile sites set up in Turkey and Italy. Okay? So this is outside of Cuba. And what happened was they were there as a preventive measure. Because they were like, you know what? These guys, the Soviet Union is kind of creepy, so we can't trust them, so we better make sure that we set stuff up just in case. Just in case the Soviet Union tries to do something. But meanwhile, as I said, the Soviet Union had stepped into the Cuban crisis and said, you know what? We are going to make sure that we buy your sugar and exports. Okay, so there is going to still be a trade path, at least with us. Maybe the USA is not going to trade with you, but we will. And so they became friends with Cuba. And then, you know what they said? They were like, you know what we should do? We're very close to the USA here. I think we should set up some nuclear missile sites in Cuba. We're working with Cuba anyway, so let's set up some nuclear missile sites. So what they did was they set them up in secret. Top secret. Okay, so that's what they did. But the Americans were still pretty strong, and American spy planes captured the missiles on camera. So they spotted these and were like, hey, look at what's down there. Look at what the Soviet Union is trying to do in Russia. And obviously, there was a great fear that came over the United States of America because they were like, okay, they have these nuclear missile sites. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Okay, we don't want to really start World War III here. Okay, we've already had 2 wars that devastated the whole world. I don't really want to go to another one. That was what JFK was saying. So what happened was he did nothing to stop the Soviets from operating the missiles already there. But what they did was they came up with a plan and they were like, listen, you know what we're going to do? This all happened, okay? This all happened in October of 1962, by the way. It all happened over the course of about 3 weeks. Let's have negotiations. Let's see if we can talk with the Soviets, and let's see if we can halt a crisis here. Let's see if we can make sure that nothing happens. So they worked together on secret negotiations, and this is what came of it. Okay, the Soviet Union agreed to remove their missiles from Cuba. Okay, they're like, okay, we'll remove our missiles from Cuba. But, you know what? This is what you need to do, USA. USA, United States, you need to agree to never, ever try to invade Cuba again, okay? We're friends with Cuba, so don't ever try to invade them again. And a little secret negotiation that they had going on was USA had to remove their missiles as well from Turkey and Italy. So it was kind of an eye for an eye. They kind of said, you know what? We'll remove our missiles from Cuba as long as you remove your missiles from Turkey and Italy, because we know you have them there. So this was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Very good that common sense came to play here, because they were very close. This was close, folks. They could have shot nuclear missiles at each other, and that would have been devastating. Would have wiped out a good portion of the world, to be honest. So they came to common sense. They came to a good negotiation, and this crisis was averted. So that was good. But it was not good in terms of the conflict in the Cold War. And this only served to escalate the conflict in this war. And this Cold War would continue to go on for a couple more decades yet. Okay, so that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so there you have it, our first crisis. Now, let's get on to another one. JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Something very bad happened on that front. And let me get my sound effect here for you. Gunshot happened. Not only just one gunshot, 3 gunshots. Okay? Now I'm taking you to November 22nd, 1963. And this was a major crisis in the United States of America. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the president, was going through a motorcade in Dallas, in a place called Dealey Plaza in Dallas. He was traveling with the governor of Texas at the time, okay? So he was traveling with the governor of Texas, and he was also traveling, their wives were also in the vehicle with them as well. So what happened is they're traveling through this motorcade in Dallas. People are waving to John Kennedy, saluting him. Everything seems to be going great, and then all of a sudden, just what I did at the beginning, bang! Gunshot. 3 gunshots, actually. And there was actually people hit in the vehicle. Not the wives, but John Fitzgerald Kennedy was shot, as was Governor Connolly of Texas. Okay. He was taken immediately to hospital, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And upon arriving at the hospital, he was declared dead from his injuries. So he was assassinated. And a lot of people like JFK. Very charismatic, very handsome, very likable man. But he was assassinated while going through a motorcade in Dallas. Who did this? How did it happen? Okay, they determined that the gunshots came from a place across the street, Texas School Book Depository, and a man was arrested named Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was arrested for the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. What happened with the other people, you may ask? Governor Connolly was shot as well, but he survived, and the wives were unharmed in the incident. But Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested, and he was only in police custody for a very short time, because 2 days later, what happened was, as he was being escorted to the car for a transfer from Dallas Police Headquarters to the Dallas County Jail, a man named Jack Ruby, who was a local nightclub owner, shot him and killed him, because obviously he took matters into his own hands and was upset about JFK being shot. So he was like, you know what? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I'm going to take out Lee Harvey Oswald. And that was the end of that. So Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Then Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, this happened in 1963. Now, there's lots of theories out there. There's a lot of people who truly believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was not acting alone. And there is a lot of theories about people that were working with Lee Harvey Oswald, including some people speculate the CIA had a hand in it. Some people speculated the Mafia had a hand in it. Some people suspected that even Cuban president that we just referred to in the last crisis, Fidel Castro, was in on it. And there's always the Russian argument that the KGB from the Soviet Union were behind it as well. And there's also another theory that it was Southern extremists with the civil rights movement that was behind it, working with Lee Harvey Oswald. There's no proof that any of this happened, but it's just theories. So I'm going to write these theories below on my video at the end. I'm not going to go over the specifics of them, but I am going to write them below to share them, okay, very briefly, so that you can read over them and find them hopefully interesting. Okay? On we go. Now we are in 1968. 1968, folks. And here we go. Another bang happens. Another bang. Who got it this time? April 4th, 1968. Any guesses? Okay, another man that was making a lot of developments in the States, Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, so Martin Luther King Jr., we have our second assassination of the 60s, people. April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was in Memphis, Tennessee. He was in Tennessee where he had come to lead a peaceful march in support of striking sanitization workers. Wow. See the irony in that? That stinks. That stinks. But anyway, he had come to lead a peaceful march in support of the striking sanitization workers. And while he was on his balcony on an evening, he was on his balcony of the Lorraine Motel in an evening on April 4th, 1968, and he was shot in the face and neck on the balcony. And he was pretty much, he didn't survive long. He was killed. And the man who did this was James Earl Ray, who was a confirmed racist and also a small-time criminal. So he was behind killing Martin Luther King Jr. And he was found guilty of that. He wasn't, nobody tried to take a shot at him, but Martin Luther King's assassination set off very violent racial riots, okay? After this happened, a lot of violent racial riots had happened. Black people were coming in high support of Martin Luther King after his assassination in 1968. So JFK gone in the decade of the 60s, as well as Martin Luther King Jr. Two big figures. And I might want to add that Lyndon B. Johnson took over presidency of the United States after JFK was assassinated. At the time of his assassination, Lyndon B. Johnson was the vice prime minister. So he stepped in and became the president, I should say, after JFK was assassinated. Wow. This is not good stuff that happens in the 60s, folks, but something great happens to end it. And let me get to that right now. July 20th, 1969, something amazing happened. Not just for the United States, but something amazing happened for the whole world. And that was echoed with this statement that was that was shared by a newscaster. And that statement is, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yes! The first landing by man on the moon. So, July 16th they left on July 16th. They stepped on the moon on July 20th. But on July 16th, Apollo 11 left the U.S. with astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins aboard the ship. And they left on July 16th, and they got to the moon on July 20th and walked and stepped on the moon. It was a huge, huge thing that happened in the 60s. And that was a huge thing for mankind to know that they could travel up into space somewhere and go somewhere. So this was the landing on the moon of 1969. Yes, July 20th, 1969. Man lands on the moon. 3 men land on the moon. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. And I think that's great. That's awesome, right? Because that was a great way to end the 60s with a very good news story. 60s didn't have its share of very good news, but man landing on the moon to end it gave humankind and the human race hope. Okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Those 3 things and man landing on the moon. So that was my lesson. Cuban Missile Crisis, assassination of JFK, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and the moon. To end our 2-week look at the 60s. So next week what I want to do is I'm going to jump into the 70s. And I'm going to find out what happens in the 70s. I'm going to spend a week on that. So that's going to be next week. But this has been the 60s for you. The swinging 60s, baby. Yeah, baby. So I hope that you enjoyed this. And I hope you have enjoyed our stay in the 60s in the last 2 weeks. Next week, not going to see me dressed up like a hippie. But I will be dressed up as something else. Because there is a fad and fashion in the 70s as well. So I'm going to be wearing some 70s fashion for you next week. So until next week, this has been Professor Banks, signing off. Take care until next week.